This one is 2 years in the making. See, I bought this 72 Roadrunner and it was a really good deal. It was a pretty nice car and I thought, man, I'm just gonna do a couple things to it and drive it home from Phoenix to LA. That crashed. As it turns out, whoever painted this thing and did the interior, they did a really nice job, but the mechanical part of it is completely thrown together. And it took me 2 full years to get it fixed. Now, the reason for that is when I was doing it, I was doing 3 different television shows. I was gone all the time. You'll see that there's things that I did and I didn't come back to them for 3 to 4 months. And you'll watch in the episode as I forget what I've done and have to redo things, and it's kind of a mess. Anyway, because of all of this, I call this Roadrunner the RESTO Rescue. Here's the story. Freiburger here with my 5th 1971 or 1972 Roadrunner. This one's a 1972. I just bought it out of Maricopa, Arizona, and it needs some work. So what I'm gonna do is fix it up and attempt to drive it home to Los Angeles. The story here is that there was a real hardcore Mopar guy who was restoring this thing and got really far on it, by the way. And then, unfortunately, he passed away. So his son sold me the car. Let me tell you about this car in particular. In 1972, they hardly made any Roadrunners at all. There was 7,628 of them, and that includes Roadrunner GTXs. This one is a factory 400 big block car with a pistol grip 4-speed. They only made 906 of those. And the color, not my favorite, it is called chestnut. It is pretty much root beer brown, not the coolest. But man, I just think they hardly even sold many brown ones, even back in 72. I've Googled forever and only found one other 72 Roadrunner that was brown like this. It's got the bench seat, it's got the correct rally wheels on it and stuff. It's an 8 3/4. Oh, behind the 4-speed is a gear vendor's overdrive, which is cool. And the engine in the car right now is a 440 that's reportedly out of a Ram Charger. And so I think they stopped putting 440s in Ram Chargers around 1978. That's when really 440s were over. Maybe it was 1976, but it was something like that. So it's a 70s smog motor 440. It's been sitting for a little while. It didn't quite get completed. It's got some stuff wrong with it. I'm going to end up having to fix the clutch linkage and the brakes and a few other little things, put air in the tires. But first, I actually have to make the thing run because it hasn't run for a while. And my rule is, when you're doing a rescue, even one that's simple like this, make it run first. Because if it's got a rod knock or a dead valve or something like that, then, you know, there's no point fixing the rest of it. You're probably trailering it home or doing an engine swap. Before I put gas, I'm gonna just see if it cranks. Whoa, steering wheel release, neutral. It cranks. Sounds pretty good. Just cranking it a while for oil pressure. It does have oil in it. Dual snorkel, high perf. Ooh, Edelbrock. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of this because I've got no gasoline up here. Let's see if it starts. Take 2. Well, it has a little exhaust leak, but it runs. So it ran on ether a little bit, and now I got to get gas pumped up front. There we go. All right, let's see if the accelerator pump works. So what I'm gonna do is pump this and see if I've got gas squirting. Now, okay, so this thing needs an accelerator pump on the carburetor, or maybe it'll start to work after a while after that seal in there swells with gasoline. I've seen that happen. Let's do this again. I think we're good. 60 pounds oil pressure. Oh, accelerator pump might have healed itself. Okay. Obviously, I've got a little exhaust work to do. So, you know, my rule is get the engine running first. We just did. I think it's pretty good. The clutch pedal sticks to the floor. I think I'm going to mess with that next. I climbed under here and put a super sketchy jack and jack stands into the dirt, which is really bad. I don't want to crawl under, which is good. Because look, the access window here for setting the front end alignment on the thing is giving me access to the clutch and the exhaust pipe. Look, the exhaust head pipe is completely removed from the manifold. I brought some gaskets and some bolts and stuff, so I should be able to fix that. And look at the clutch linkage. The pivot ball on the frame is completely loose. So I think I'm just going to tighten that nut up and it'll fix the problem with the clutch pedal sticking to the floor. Wow. Brand new bushings in the suspension. The whole underside of this car is like really nice. Okay, I'm not sitting in the car because of the sketchy jack that wants to kill me. Oh, wow. Clutch pedal fixed. That was easy. I had bought from Brewer's Performance every bit of the clutch linkage for this car because I didn't know what it was, but I think we're solved. Okay, I got the manifold flange on there. Ready? It's got Flowmasters on it, by the way. Little tick. Actually pretty good. All right, I can live with that for the trip home. I'm running out of daylight here, and I discovered that there's no brake fluid in the reservoir for the rear brakes. Sun's getting low here and hot. I got this brake drum off, and I think I found our leak in here. It's not very bad. I'm gonna try and just put fluid in and sort of let it self-bleed and let it be okay. I did notice that, man, everything is new underneath the car. It's got new shackles in it, KYB shocks. The exhaust system is obviously brand new. It has the factory 72 rear sway bar back here. It's good. I'm super happy so far with this purchase, but let's clean this up. Messing with the brakes, one thing I noticed is that the axle has no end play at all. The Mopar 8 3/4 axle is supposed to have a little bit of like play in it, just very, very little. It has a tapered roller bearing. It needs to be adjusted just like you do on a front brake that has 2 tapered roller bearings. So I'm gonna have to fix that. I think I'm good. Got it running, fixed the rear axle end play, cleaned up the right rear brake, bled the brakes, put air in the tires, and we're ready for the first drive. This is gonna be great. We already know that it runs. Ooh, and wait for this. It works! Meep, meep. Roadrunner horn. There we go. Reverse indicator works on the dash. Mopar guys know what I'm talking about. This thing has a gear vendors in it. There's a light on the dash that's red and green. You do not want to back up with a gear vendors. So I'm making sure the light's red, which they told me is off. Ooh, power steering works great. The last 2 4-speed Roadrunners I've had didn't have power steering, and I gotta be honest, it's not that fun. This is way better. Manual brakes, power steering, pistol grip 4-speed. Kind of as it should be. The guy told me the carburetor doesn't work well, but so far so good. I'm just cruising around the storage yard here. It's getting pretty late in the day. I'm thinking it's gonna be hotel tonight and coming back in the morning to pick this thing up. I sense no fail right now. Oh, let me try the brakes. No fail. Ooh, spinning tires. It smells like an engine that hasn't run in a long time. You know how they get really dusty and musty and hot smelling? I hate the steering wheel. I love the horn. 60 pounds of oil pressure. Temp gauge doesn't work. The factory tack works. This is a factory tack dash. That was a great option on this thing. Good enough to hit the road, right? Cool. Wow, it is great. It is really good. And I think that's all the test drive it really needs. Probably tomorrow morning, hop in, go to the gas station, fill up the tires, and hit the road. And I got to clean up all my tools. Well, good morning. That's it for wrenching for now. It is far from perfect, but hopefully it gets me home to LA, at which point we will start and revamp this thing. Try and make it look a little bit cooler, just wash it up, clean it up, I think, dress up the engine, maybe different wheels, stuff like that. But first, we gotta make it all the way home. What are we doing, like 7 hours? Here we go. That didn't last long. Belt squeak real bad. Of course, it gives me an excuse to stop and check the tires. Looks like alternator belt is no good. Wow, does this thing leak oil? Here, look at this. Yeah, that is fuel boiling in the fuel filter. That's no good. That's going to be vapor lock at some point or some kind of problem. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is have a look at the water pump, see if it is loose. Not the belt, but the pump itself, to see if the bearing's any good, just by wiggling on the fan. That's not great. I don't think it's in failure mode, but it's a little bit loose. It might be squeaking. Kind of doubt it. Wow, look straight down the fan. The aftermarket fan is no good. I don't know if you can see on video. Okay, I'm finally driving the thing, and at about 60 miles an hour, it has a bad shake. At 70, it's okay. So I think what I'm gonna do is cruise and stop somewhere and see if I've got a bubble in a tire, or see if there's any wheel weights on the wheels whatsoever. And of course, it's smoking from all the oil leaks. Oh, look at the smoke behind me. Wow. So as good as this car looks, it needs a lot of tinkering. Tinkering that I didn't give it while I was working on it yesterday, because I have to be back home tonight no matter what. And as it is already, I'm going to be getting there probably around midnight. And fail. The car got trailered home, and now I'm going to fix it in my home driveway. I think I'm going to have to pull the 440 all the way out of it, clean it all up, maybe make some mods on it, and fix all those leaks and dump it back in. So that's what's going to start now. But look, I washed the car. This thing is mint. The paint is pretty fresh on it, and it doesn't look like it's ever been waxed. Water doesn't bead on it, but man, it shines. This car is legit nice. But now I'm going to tear it all apart. So I think I'm going to start just by removing the basics under the hood. Then I'll have to take the hood off and eventually pull the 440 out. All right, this is it. The 440's coming out. There we go. Now that the engine's out, I gotta put it on a stand, but I have to take a bunch of accessories off because honestly, my cheapy engine stand won't hold this thing. You know what? This car was put together well, like paint-wise, but mechanically, not so much. We learned a couple things about the engine as I was taking it out. First of all, there's a date on it right there. It says it's 1975. I don't think this is actually a motorhome 440, which would be my normal. It seems like it came out of a truck. And if you look at the damper up at the front, it's got a weight on it, which means it's a cast crank, which would be normal for 1975 instead of a forging. But sometimes people change them. We're plugging these so we don't get water and chemicals and dirt inside the engine. Next up, I'm gonna start cleaning it up. All right, more weirdness. Look, I have not loosened this spark plug and it's completely finger tight. Just keep finding weirdness on this engine. Ew. I have no idea what this is, but man, is it disgusting. Blech. I took the intake and valley tray off. One of the first things that I'm doing is looking in the valley though to see if any of the camshaft lobes are worn, like the cam going flat, but it looks like we're okay. Can you believe how bad the oil pan leaks? This explains all the smoke. This is the main reason the engine had to come out of the car. All of the pan bolts were finger tight, and like a chump, I didn't even film the repair, but I did fix it. Here's a cool thing I found. See these little buttons on the front of the heads? That means these things have been rebuilt by like a mass production machine shop, and they have a warranty on them, but the warranty is void if the little thing melts out of the center of these buttons, so they can find out if you overheated the engine. I think what I'm gonna do now is, even though I like simple greened this thing before, it's got a slight film of oil, I'm gonna rub it all down with lacquer thinner because I think that that's not hot enough to like melt the existing blue paint, but I think it'll get the oil off. All right, good enough, ready for paint. I have to admit, I concentrated on the parts that are gonna show most when the engine's in the car. Normally when I build an engine from scratch, I like to paint everything separately. I like to have the bolts all be black and the gaskets show and all that. This time, we're just gonna fog. I'm using the tray as masking, and I'm also using the valve covers as masking, and the oil filter, and strangely enough, I'm gonna paint it Chrysler blue. Normally I would be a Hemi orange guy, but this car would have come factory with a blue engine, so it's gonna be blue. Let's go. Got it all painted. I'm gonna call it a day though. When I come back, it'll be valve covers and front dress and all that stuff. But when it's all cleaned up, it feels like you're making progress. Done for the day. Now I've got the engine as dressed up as it's going to get before it gets slammed in the car. I also went through the exhaust manifold nuts. The 440 Chrysler with stock manifolds take these special long nuts and mostly studs to hold them on, and they were all cruded up, so I tapped them all out, cleaned them up, made them good. New gasket slammed on the manifolds. You can see that not everything here is mint, like the fuel pump's dirty, the underside of the distributor cap. I didn't paint the bolts. Thing is, I'm trying to do this as practically cheap as possible, and so I just didn't do details like buy new stuff. Now here's the thing, the final crowning touch. I can't stand these valve covers personally, and so I went to eBay, got myself a set of vintage Nicky Thompsons off eBay. I love these. They're a little bit grimy, but I'm not gonna take the time to restore them. I'm just gonna slam them on. Aha! It is 6 months later. It is the day after Christmas, so I finally got some time to get back on working on this thing. The engine's all cleaned up now. I've got those new valve covers installed, and now I get to move on towards maybe cleaning up the engine compartment so I can install the 440. I use Castrol Super Clean for the heavy duty, like greasy stuff, and just regular old gunk foamy #1 for just getting this like dirt off the paint and stuff like that. Super Clean will actually strip and like fog aluminum and make shiny paint look bad, so just get it on the greasy parts. There really isn't that much here that's completely greasy. Well, I didn't count on these short winter days. It's already getting dark, so I think what I'm gonna do is just dry this thing off, and I'll be back tomorrow to finish up the rest of the cleanup on the engine bay. Well, the gunk didn't take off all of the goo, so I'm gonna sit in here and like quick detail it and make it better. I use the quick detailer, and it actually looks pretty good. Problem is there's wires absolutely everywhere. I'm gonna go in and sort of zip tie them all up into as neat as I possibly can. Thing is, the 72 is inherently kind of junkier than a 70 or 71 or the older B bodies, because that's when like electronic ignition came out and they just slapped the controller on the firewall all sideways. This was an air conditioning car, so it's got the larger fan motor and a couple of extra bungs in the firewall. And of course the 72 has the cowl braces that didn't appear earlier, and just sort of more wiring and junk in general. There's a hole in the firewall for some sort of little vacuum smog switch thing that I never use. Anyway, I'm going to climb in here and try and make a little bit of neatness out of this before dropping the engine in. So this, I think, just needs to stay out of the way until later. I think I've fiddled with the engine compartment as long as I possibly can in procrastination of having to actually install the engine. I'm going to unwrap it here from where it's been all bandaged up for 6 months. Hopefully it's still clean and neat and ready to go. All right, that's a big step. Off. Well, here's another big delay. I was in here trying to like Scotch-Brite off a whole bunch of surface rust that I got on this flywheel, but I discovered it's actually junk. This is information I could have come up with like, nearly a year ago. First of all, you can see right here that it actually has a big whoop-de-doo in it. If you look, you can see that the disc was touching here and here, but not at all in the middle, which you can also see on the disc. You can see where it was like abrading here and here, but this is like completely untouched. These are also all soaked with oil from that leak. This side, actually, I would say not that bad. I mean, it's got some gouges out of it, not that good. But then I walk over here to the pressure plate, and I'm thinking, I could probably reuse this, until I look at the fingers of it right here, which are completely worn in and gacked, especially right there. Look at that. That is junk. It's like the throwout bearing has been riding on that surface for a long time. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to get myself a flywheel. I mean, the whole thing, the whole shebang, which means I'm not putting the engine in today again. And boom, it is 2 days later, thanks to the magic of overnight shipping. I spent $850 I did not plan on spending on this project. By the time I got all of the new parts, new hardware, the balance kit, all that other stuff, it kind of hurt. Tax, overnight shipping, everything else. However, I'm glad I did, because here's something I just found out. This is my new flywheel, that is my old flywheel. You can see that they're different manufacturers, but they're basically identical. And remember, they're both neutral balance out of the box. Also remember, the 440 that we're using is a cast crank unit, which requires external balance, and that's why there are external balance weights bolted on. Even though they're both different brands, I've got them lined up with the offset bolt hole in the same place, so you can see that they bolt the weight in the same place, which indicates to me that both weights should weigh about the same, and clearly they don't. Look at my old one, and then look at the one that is specified by McLeod. Obviously a lot lighter than that one. Now this thing had a bad shake when I was driving it before. Could that be the reason? Highly likely. We'll find out. Okay, I am going to install the flywheel and then we'll move on to the clutch. Okay, now I'm super frustrated. This is like a huge moment in the process of this entire build. I just showed you that I got the whole new clutch and everything, and that's when I noticed that these gallery plugs in the back of the block were virtually falling out. And as I was putting more stuff on them and like sealing them and snugging them up and everything, I got to thinking, man, there's been a lot of things that were really loose on this engine. I started to think about how none of the spark plugs were even tight. Like all sorts of bolts have just been falling apart on this thing. And you know what it is? It's that weight that's on the flywheel. This engine shook hideously when it ran and drove. And the thing is, I realized it shook all of the fasteners loose. And I just spent an hour off camera walking around kicking myself and finally came to the conclusion, you know what? I have to take the oil pan off. I have to take the front cover off. I have to make sure that the gallery plugs are not falling out of the front. I have to make sure that the cam bolt is not loose. And yeah, I might as well make sure that the main caps and rods and everything aren't loose also. Because if I put this in the car and it has a problem, I'm not going to want to take it back out and do it again. Well, that was a needless exercise, taking it apart to try and tighten all the bolts inside the engine. They were all good, but I feel better. Now I'm back to the point of taking it off the engine stand and putting on the flywheel and clutch. I don't know if I've mentioned, but this is into like 1 year and 4 months on this project now. I probably have mentioned that all throughout the video, how long this is taking. It's definitely a side project. All the other stuff I have going on. Ooh, like butter. Tiny drop. I thought this day would never come. The Roadrunner has been in my driveway now almost 1.5 years. I've only been working on it here and there, and finally, I'm ready to drop the engine into the car. I've got it fairly close. I am close enough. I'm trying to get in a couple of alignment bolts, meaning the bell housing's still this far away from the back of the engine, and I'm using a long bolt to just stick all the way through to try and align them, but certainly not tighten it. I have to get the clutch into the input shaft of the transmission. I got everything pretty well aligned, and the engine needs to go back this far, and my engine hoist is rammed up against the bumper, so I can't shove the engine that way anymore. So I don't know what's gonna happen here. Lots of prying. I managed to line up the clutch and pull it together with the bolts and get the motor to line up on the frame mounts. You're not supposed to do it that way, but I did. Now I just have to get the bolts through the motor mounts. And that makes it official. Motor mount bolts are in and the cherry picker is out. I hope forever. This is to the alternator, all of this stuff. I'm installing this aftermarket flex fan against my will, but I also don't feel like spending money right now, and so it's going to go back on. I was thinking engine installation starts to look real when you install the carburetor. So I've cleaned up this carb that was on the car when I got it. This is an Edelbrock 750 CFM unit, and it's based upon the old school Carter AFB, which means aluminum 4-barrel. Edelbrock also has the Carter AVS now, which is air valve secondary. Let's slam this thing on. Okay, I just made most of the spark plug wires. Here's my routine. First, I take the wires and snap them on all the spark plugs so that I can run them and make sure that the length is okay. Then I pull them out of the distributor and stick on just the boots on the distributor so that they're all pointing the direction that I want them to go, and then use the boot as a guide to where I want to cut the wire and crimp it. Now, if you have an HEI type terminal like this, it's pretty easy. You just crimp the terminal on the end of the wire and shove it into the boot. Now, to do this, you really want the MSD part number 3505 pliers. It makes it so easy. Here's how this is going to work for the old school type spark plug wire ends. First, I lube the spark plug wire, and then I also lube the boot. If you only lubricate one or the other, this isn't nearly as easy. So now I'm going to shove that in there, and remember, you have to make it make a right-hand turn, and that's where that lube comes in and makes it super simple. After that, I'm going to strip the end of the wire, and there's a special part of these pliers that strips it. They have a guide that would show you how long they want you to strip it. I give it about twice as much. So you just squeeze that and pop the end off. Super simple. Next, you take the terminal that is going to go inside the distributor and you put it in here. You can see the crimpy side goes toward the open side of the terminal. And then always remember that you want to figure out the direction that your boot and terminal is going to go. Make sure they match. I fold over the core. They really want you to crimp it inside this thing, but instead I just fold it over, shove it through, and then watch. One squeeze, done. While it's still in the tool, I take a pair of needle nose and just break the back of that terminal a little bit so that it will bend to 90 degrees easily, like so. And then you pull the boot over and you're ready to snap it in the distributor cap. This is the last mechanical thing other than the battery. I got this radiator rebuilt by my local guy. There's so few guys who still do radiators. It's like a miracle that I was able to do it. Boom. Battery, fluids, and then I start this thing for the first time in almost a year and a half. Long day, hot. And I gotta tell you, I got more done on this car today than I have in the last 8 months. To be honest, I could drop a battery in and probably make it run right now, but I'm not going to for the lamest of reasons. It is dark outside and I want it to be light tomorrow for good video so that you can enjoy the moment as much as I'm going to. So I'll see you tomorrow. Finally, after all that work, let's hope this junk runs. Man, the 440 looks way better than it did when I got the car. The thing about me is I don't need paint that much, but I can't stand mechanical grime, and this thing was a sponge pit. It's not super detailed, but it's way good enough for a driver. That's what I've been waiting for so long. Aside from a massive exhaust leak on that side that I can't figure out, it is good to go. The thing actually runs pretty good, but there's a lot more left to do to the car. I mean, I got to put the hood back on, lower the front end, change the steering wheel, the exhaust system's falling off of it. To be honest, the amount of stuff that was wrong with this engine makes me wonder about the whole rest of the car. So I've got to pick it up, nut and bolt check the entire suspension, just check the whole thing over. But I'm saving that for another episode. Do me a favor and go watch another video on my channel right now. And of course, like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.